Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of Ask the Doc, Life Lessons You Should Have Been Taught in School. Hi, I'm Dr. TonyVercillo, your host for the podcast. The purpose of this episode is to discuss in detail the criticality of your FICO score, credit management. I know I touched on this in one of the earlier episodes, but I had one of my subscribers actually say to me, I'd like a lot more detail. Which led me then to query the rest of my subscribers who then said, yes, they want to know a lot more about repairing credit and the importance of it. So that's what this is going to be about. Prior to talking about that, I'm going to do what I do in every single episode. I'm going to give you some success traits or attributes or success tips to help promote your financial health. And I'm going to give you a stock pick of the week, and then we'll get right into the whole idea of credit management and FICO scores. Okay. So let's start with some of the success attributes that I was talking about. What's important for you to know is that the Dow Jones has returned approximately 7% on average every year for the last 75 years. Yes, there's been pockets of the 2008 crash, the Great Depression of 33, the stock market crash of October of 87. There's been a lot of that. But if you take those out of the equation, then the return for the Dow Jones is probably more like 8.5 to 9%. But you could consistently count on at least 7%, which means your money's going to double every 10 years. That's an important concept. All right, so what does this all mean to you? Well, two things. One, if you invested in an index fund that specialized in focusing on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, you would have been able to, as I said, double your money in every 10 years. In addition, what I would like you to do right now is set up a SoFi account, which I talked about in episode 2. And it doesn't have to be SoFi. It could be Robinhood or any of the other accounts that are out there that do forced savings and fractional shares of stock. And what I want you to do immediately is go out and buy what's called affectionately the Magnificent Seven of the stock market. So take $50 times 7, $350. I want you to put in $50 into each of these stocks in SoFi. And those stocks are Amazon, Alphabet, Tesla, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, and Meta. Okay? And then every week, I want you to put $10 in there. Yes, it's $280 a month, but you're going to have to force yourself to do it in order to become financially independent. Okay, so that's an important part of how to create financial freedom. Okay, now, in order to really be successful when it comes to finances, first piece of advice, think like a rich person. Rich people, people of means, people with wealth think entirely differently than poor people. Their behavior is different. So what are some of those behavioral traits that the wealthy have that you might be able to adopt in your behavior in order to get ahead in life? Okay, so there's basically 10 behaviors that the wealthy exhibit. The first one is they budget their expenses, and most importantly, they budget their time. You could always go get more money, but you can't always buy time, of course. But they budget their time. They pay attention to doing the right things, working on the right things with the highest level of return on investment. They do not spend time on things that don't make them any money. So first order of business, change your mindset, which I'm going to recap again in step number 10 or tip number 10. I'll talk about this again. So first order of business, budget your expenses and manage your time to make sure you're working on the right things. 2, wealthy people invest 15 to 20%, if not 25%, of their net earnings. They pay themselves first, and they don't offer any excuses as to why they can't save money. Savings becomes paramount and at the core of their being. Number 3, they invest in assets. Wealthy people like to have businesses, entities, real estate, hotels, stuff that appreciates over time. They also typically have a hurdle rate. My hurdle rate is 15%. If you want to borrow money from me, I'll give it to you. But you got to give me a 15% return. That's my hurdle rate. So most wealthy people, they'll actually have something as a minimum standard for what they want as far as a return. Number 4, they're always learning and continually continually trying to stay abreast of what's going on in the global economy. I am currently reading 2 books simultaneously. I read 3 magazines online. I check Google News obsessively throughout the day to check on the global economy. I am a voracious reader, and I highly encourage you to do the same thing. Number 5, they set short-term, near-term, and long-term goals in every aspect of their life, whether it's career pathing, relationships, family, investing, finances. It doesn't really matter. They set those goals and they pay attention to it. The Harvard Business School did a study of 100 students over 15 years. Those who had set goals 15 years prior were way ahead of those who didn't. It's the old saying, those who fail to plan to fail. Number 6, they know how to manage risk, both monetary risk as it relates to the stock market and also liability risk as it relates to having the appropriate amount of insurance. Wealthy people use things like trusts. They use entities and corporations to shield themselves from liability. They use umbrella insurance policies and a number of other ways to shield themselves from our litigious society. Number 7, they continually network and build relationships. Heck, go play golf with somebody you're trying to nail down as a client, okay? You get a lot of business on the golf course. So constantly network, use social media, get as many followers as you can. The critical mass seems to be about 50,000 followers. Once you get past the 50,000 mark, it starts to be on autopilot. So I think that would be something of importance. Number 8, most importantly, they employ multiple sources of passive income. Most critical for a wealthy mindset. I get passive income from rent payments, speaking engagements, ebook and textbook sales, and stock dividends. That makes me money while I sleep, 24/7, 365. That's an critical aspect of having a wealthy mindset, is trying to figure out 4 to 5 different streams of income. Number 9, they aggressively control spending and they manage their debt to a minimum. They really pay. I have like $4,000 worth of credit card debt total. I don't use credit cards. I use my debit card, or I use cash, or I use my Amex card, and I pay it off every single month. So people of means literally figure out how to control their spending. They pay attention to the utility costs, their mortgage, their food costs, and they literally scrutinize every single one of their expenses to make sure they're getting, quote, the best deal. And then finally, number 10, they employ, as I mentioned through this whole 9-10-step tip thing, they employ a wealthy mindset that involves seizing opportunities wherever they can and accepting failure. Remember, failure is nothing more than a learning experience. And as long as you learn from the failure, who cares? As it relates to a wealthy mindset, no excuses, no woe is me, no procrastinating, no victimizing, no self-doubt, and they don't care. Wealthy people don't care about what others think. Get that all out of your mind and start focusing on the future and focusing on what you can do to improve your financial health. Okay, next up, we're going to do the stock pick of the week. So the stock for this week is ET, Energy Transfer, a midstream distributor of energy products such as petroleum. It's a $43 billion company. It pays a really hefty dividend of 8.9%, which is pretty darn good. It has a price-earnings ratio of 13, so it's not too high. And it has a 5-year forecast. The stock price is currently at $13.95 approximately. It has a 5-year forecast of between $18 and $23 a share. Now, as I've mentioned on every single podcast ad nauseum, make sure you get a recommendation, advice, and support from your family, your parents, a licensed broker, a licensed professional, a CPA, or an attorney before you implement any of the suggestions that I mentioned within the confines of this podcast. I can tell you I've been invested in Energy Transfer for about 9 months, and it's had a nice little return for me. There are some people who say that it took a big hit during COVID, which it did, but all the indications are from an earnings per share point of view and from a stock price point of view, it's going to continue to bounce back and pay that hefty dividend. I would place that particular stock in your dividend producing stock portfolio. Very nice. Okay, finally, let's talk about the reason we're here for this podcast, and that is the elusive FICO score. Okay, this might be the single most important piece of advice that I give you in this entire podcast series. You have to manage the hell out of your credit, particularly your FICO score. Unfortunately, banks, lenders, etc., all use it as a basis to say whether you're credit worthy or not. So it's super important that you manage the heck out of your credit score. Now, you should keep it above 700, which will lower your interest rates, lower your mortgage rates, lower your credit card interest rates, etc., and will help you get ahead in life in general because you're able to buy whatever you want. Okay, by the way, before I forget, with Energy Transfer, I forgot to mention this. I want to make 100% sure you watch that stock carefully. The higher the dividend the stock pays, the more likely it's risky. So make sure you keep your eyes on it each week, each month. Check out their press releases, check out Google News, and find out what's going on with the company. But watch it closely. Okay, back to FICO score. Okay, you could use Credit Karma or some of those other apps that track your FICO score, but I can tell you definitively it never matches what the banks say it is. So if Credit Karma says that your TransUnion is 680 and your Experian is 700, you're going to take it to the bank and they're going to run your credit and they're going to tell you it's 620 and 640 respectively. They view it differently. They have a different formula. I know some people say it's the advantage formula, and I get all that, but every single time that I have run my credit through a bank, it never matched anything at Credit Karma or any of the other sites that where you check your credit. Okay, so that's an important thing to talk about. All right, to understand FICO, you really need to recognize a simple fact, and then we'll talk about what makes up the FICO score. The simple fact is banks do not want to give you a low interest rate. The banks are going to do everything they can, as other lenders will, to keep the rates high. They have no interest in giving you low rates. Yeah, the mortgage broker and the agent are going to tell you they're going to get you the best deal and all that other nonsense, but then it goes to underwriting, and underwriting shoots the whole thing down, and you end up paying a lot more than you originally thought. That's just the way it is. It is a plain hard fact that that's the way it is. So what does that mean? Keep your score over 700 and then nobody's going to care. That's the most important part of this. I can tell you when a lender checks your score, it'll probably be on the order of 15 to 20% less than what you think it is, just so you know that in the back of your mind. All right, let's talk about how the FICO score is made up. 35% of your score is based upon your on-time payment. So the more you pay on time, the higher your FICO score, as you would imagine. But it's worth 35%. 30% is your credit, the amount of debt you carry in your credit utilization. If you have $10,000 worth of available credit on your credit cards, you're only allowed to spend about 30%, about $3,000 of the available 10 in order to have a high FICO score. You start butting up against the max, 8,000, 9,000 of the 10,000 available, your FICO score takes a huge hit. Remember, it's 30% of the score. So between the amount of debt and debt utilization you have and your on-time payments, you're looking at 65% of your FICO score is predicated on those two things. The next thing that is 15% is the length of your credit history. What does that mean? Do not get rid of unused old accounts. Leave them there so that they'll increase your length of credit history. That's worth 15%. Then another 10% is based upon the credit mix, whether you have car loans,